All right, welcome everyone to the live stream. We've got Gloria Jean here. We got Tim. We've gone back to back today with live streams. We literally just finished up with my friend Chris Bailey to talk about his book Intentional, and now we're going to be talking to Dawna Ballard, which I'm really excited to do. I have the digital copy. It's called Time by Design, so I'm not going to show you what the book looks like because it's got, it's the text. And this is one of the things when you're hosting a podcast, sometimes you get like with Chris's, we got the physical copy. With a lot of authors, it's really great to get just the the digital version. And so Dawna, when we get her in here, we're gonna dive into like the idea of this book that's broken down. And it's here's the thing. I will tell you that it is not a long book. It's not page heavy, but idea heavy, concept heavy, thoughts, like, again, just not unlike Chris Bailey's book, Intentional, which, if you watch the previous live stream or you go and watch that video now, definitely something that you don't want to rush through. Right. So, which is, I think, kind of fitting considering we're going to be talking a book about time and how we could, the communication aspect and things of that nature. How I came across Dawna was, of all things, a CBC article in Canada. And I was like, this is, I'd love to have a chance to chat with her. And lo and behold, it happened. Her team reached out. We said, we'd love to do a podcast. We're like, well, we're full up with guests until the new year, 2026, but we can do a live stream and then we can share the podcast then. So you're going to get, double the dose of promotion around the book. And I'm excited now to bring in Dawna Ballard. Dawna, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
So for those that are unfamiliar with your work, and first, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself, just for those that are here in the audience watching live, because I'm sure they're going to have questions around the material and such. I'd love to hear for you to share a little bit about yourself. And then what led you down the path to write this book? Because there are a lot of books about communication, time, etc. out there. And in my past life working for Lifehack and writing, and again, having this podcast for a number of years and coming across a plethora of books on time management and personal productivity, not just my own, it is a market that is, let's say, fulfilling and possibly full at times. So I'd love to hear your perspective of why you decided to tackle this topic, especially in book form. So I'll give you the floor.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm a professor of organizational communication here at the University of Texas in Austin, and my specialty within organizational communication is an area called chronemics, which is the study of time as it's bound to human communication. And so I like to just, in a briefer sense, say I study time and work. And this book really was born, and it involves decades of research and work that I've done in the field, but there was one particular group that I studied, and I realized I had been developing this idea of slow communication design logics, like seeing it in the medical work that I had been doing. And then when I looked at this group called the Children's Advocacy Centers, and it's a global movement. I'm guessing you have them in Canada. They're all around the world. And it was born around the 80s when people in social services whose job it was to keep abused children safe, they realized the way that it was designed wasn't working. So they would have, CPS and their agency, they're doing their thing. And here's law enforcement and their agency, and they're doing their thing. And there's, and then the DA's office. Everyone was working in a very separate, siloed fashion. And unfortunately, as you might imagine, when something is as time sensitive as seeing, okay, this child's been reported as abused, we need to maybe get the child out of this home, get someone else out of this home. We have something to do, but it matters. Like every second matters. You can imagine these under-resourced agencies not being very quick to show up to save this kid. And so children died because one agency thought, oh, they'll handle it because we're so busy over here. And the other, oh, I'm sure they'll get it. And so the Children's Advocacy Center's movement was about saying, let's build a nonprofit infrastructure for all of these agencies where people can work together for time sensitive response. And it's really about, it started about like information sharing. We would just get together and share information, and there would be someone who's, who's looking at the time and saying, let's do this, let's
Right.
get together. And it turned out that there was even more that they hadn't recognized and realized that by having these people show up on a regular basis to talk and share information, that they built relationships, and that the real speed, what allowed them to be as fast. So there still was the very fast design logic of, as soon as that report is received, we're going to be staffing this case. So there is that, we want that piece, but
Hmm.
there was a slower piece, which is people had to stop from their busy schedules and show up at a meeting for maybe 90 minutes. And they met, maybe once a month, in some cases in more rural areas every other month. And so in that cases, they meet 2 or more hours. But that slowing, people kind of resisted. Like, I'm so busy, I don't have time to go to another meeting. What do you mean? But they found that showing up and slowing down and learning about each other, it actually sped up their caseload. Like, they were able to work faster because they knew each other, they understood each other, they could build better cases, and it had this implication and these ramifications that they had never imagined. But we found in 2 years of studying these teams, we found that that simple act of slowing down sped them up. And this is why I was like, this is the book.
It's so fascinating because we've heard, like, Carl Honore wrote In Praise of Slow years ago. Actually, him and I just had a brief exchange on social media because I think it was listed as one of the best books that someone read in 2025, and that book's been around for a while, right? And so the idea of slow, and Cal Newport, of course, who's also been on the show talking about slow productivity, which I've always had a problem with that term, not because I don't agree, but because I know that the term slow, to your point, immediately points to not productive. Like, it seems paradoxical, even though and we've seen this. And I said we weren't going to go necessarily down this path, but I'm going to go down a little bit anyway. The efficiency being a buzzword that is often misunderstood, right? So can we touch on that a little bit? Because, I mean, one of the things I loved about the book really early on, and I'm going to sweep back there because there are some nice graphics and images, but art. I'm an artist at heart too. So when I see the untitled sculpture, which is our misunderstanding of time and ourselves, it is so fascinating. We touched on this before we hit record too. The idea of like how we have this idea that we can manage time, and speed. This idea of speed versus, like, say, cadence instead, or rhythm, which is really kind of what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
Why do you feel that this idea of slowing down, and first off, why do you feel this idea of slowing down is kind of an obstacle that organizations need to pull through? Because typically organizations work objectively, right? Whereas people work subjectively towards objectives, right? Because so first off, how do we get rid of that buttress, that thing that's kind of, and maybe get it out of the way? And also, where the role of rhythm and cadence plays in terms of this, because we're all on different clocks, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. I actually hesitated initially to use the term slow and fast because of that very thing, as I didn't want people to be like, oh my God, slow. I have, because it's not, wasn't what it meant. But colleagues that I asked, because there was this other set of terms around transactional and transcendent. And I was like, maybe that fits better because it's also true. But people repeatedly were like, I like the idea of slow and fast because, one, we know what that means immediately, even if we misunderstand. we have some sense of what that means. And two, it's like rehabilitating the term slow. And so I decided, yeah, I'm just going to go for it. And hopefully people will understand that it's the Navy SEALs, and I use this quote near the end: slow is smooth and
And
smooth is
smooth is
fast.
fast. Yep.
Maybe they will get that maybe what you think is slow is actually not slow after all, but that there is a piece of it that involves pausing. So yeah, so that is you're exactly right that that was an issue. And to your point about time versus rhythm or cadence, I talk about two terms that are really important for people to get here to the slow communication design logic, which is time versus temporality.
I was going to get there. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well,
No, no,
then
no,
we
no, no.
can.
I want you to go there, please, because again,
Okay.
time is a word that people don't understand, but they know, oh, time. Like, because there's 18 different definitions of the word time. But temporality, which is funny, when we were talking to Chris Bailey just a moment ago, he kept bringing up the word benevolence, which is in his book, which I do love the idea of benevolence as a value. But the term benevolence, like sovereignty or any of these other words, they can be co-opted and corrupted to be repellent. And temporality can be repellent because it often gets associated with things like science fiction, or it's misunderstood. You know what I mean? So I'd love for you to discuss that distinction.
Yes, yes. And you know, early on, I used that word early, like when I was in grad school with someone, and they said, I don't know what that means. Don't use that word again. So I was also hesitant because it isn't a word that people always understand. But I realized, no, I can make it simple. It's this simple. So time, think of anything that humans design, that's time. So watches and calendars and clocks and appointments and meetings. So it's not even necessarily physical technologies, but even the decision to have coffee together, to put a point on our schedules. That's time. And so we do create and we do design time. It's completely designed, human made. What we don't design and what we don't control is the temporality. You mentioned, like, if it's raining outside, we don't control when and where and how it rains. That is outside of human control. And so temporal, beyond the world, the external world, there's a lot of other processes that are temporal, like a good conversation. That's temporal, right? We have a sense of when it's over and we know when it's been interrupted because it has its own temporality. You know, birth, I say temporality is birth, death, and every process in between. Like, we don't control how much sleep we need as much as we would like to. And I have been guilty in the past of thinking that I do and getting less sleep. And you don't win. All the research shows sleep deprivation, as much as we want to think we can control sleep, we just don't. We're not as effective. We're just no good. And so sleep is a temporal process. Relationship building is a temporal process. Learning is temporal, right? And we never know exactly how long temporal things are going to take. So my recent research is on doctor-patient interactions and an unhurried conversation.
Oh,
It's temporal.
yeah.
It sometimes it takes 5 minutes. Sometimes it will literally take an hour to
And
get to where you need to get to. Yeah.
and the collision there of we have
Mhm.
patients that we need to. Well, this happened in Canada. Like, I mean, this you hear this a lot. Like, I can't, they're trying to process people through, and everyone is. It's kind of like when you're teaching a class to about technology to some people. You've got to understand that. Like, I used to do this. I remember back in the day, I was teaching like WordPress, and it was very hard to teach a how-to a diverse group because everyone's acumen level, and not just like where they were at, but where they could even get to, was
Yeah.
different. So it had to turn into a broader strokes. But when you're dealing with medical stuff, like, these are very sensitive, and or they can be very complex because reactions, if you've got somebody in there who is calm and stoic about it, it may not take as long. But if you got somebody in there so yeah, the collision of time and like that schedule plus the temporality of those conversations, those butt heads.
Absolutely. And that term was Dr. Victor Montori at the Mayo Clinic. He's the one that said, this is his term, unhurried conversations. And I fortunately met him, and he was like, let's go study this together. He has a lot of research teams. And so I led one around being able to measure. And what's interesting is we had independent coders who looked at, so the Mayo Clinic, they had about 5,000 different video recorded interactions that, and we didn't look at all 5,000. We took a sample, and our coders could, once we identified like there's these 10 dimensions that we thought, and we had them rate them, people were very, very good at being able to observe two strangers and tell when it was unhurried and when it was hurried. It was just, and it's remarkable. We know when a conversation, that temporal thing is off, and we
Yeah.
know when it was loud, when the time. And so the goal in chronemic design is to design your time around the temporal, to figure out what that temporality is and give it the time that it needs.
Tim brings up this, which I think is fascinating considering we just talked about doctors. This puts me in mind of some of the examples discussed in Atul Gawande's excellent book, The Checklist Manifesto.
Ooh,
Putting you in
yes,
good
that's on my.
putting you in good some
Yeah,
good company.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this leads me to, and again, as we kind of mentioned before we hit record, like this can take us in a whole bunch of different directions. And one of the directions I'm going
Yes.
to go with is okay. So we touched on efficiency and speed and all this stuff, and yet, and you mentioned in the book, I think you definitely circle around this, is especially around the case study, is that speed emerges as a byproduct rather than a goal, right? So why are we? This is too big a question. I'm not gonna say why are we so obsessed with speed as the goal instead of there's that's a huge topic, but
Yeah.
how do we shift that mindset? Because again, efficiency, we hear this word all the time, like fast, we've mentioned slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? It's the secondary thing. It's and
Right.
yet there's so many people that go, if I get it done, like let's go fast first and then
Right.
better second. How do we kind of flip, like what are some of your thoughts around that, especially in relation to the work that you've done in this book? Like, how do we flip that? How do we make it so that people understand, hey, look, because I've had I've had arguments with people on
Yeah.
webinars where they're like, productivity is about being efficient and effective. I'm like, no, those are byproducts of being productive. Those are
Yeah.
byproducts. Productivity is intention plus attention, and then the active link between them. That's what it is, right? If you
Yeah.
get faster and better, that's only because you've repeated that process again and again and again, or you've devoted enough attention to the intention, and ergo productive. But to say that efficiency is is the thing, it's the byproduct. So speed again being the byproduct. Can we dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. And I think it's okay to get a little bit into where it comes from to help us to like let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing. So I remind people this, we have only had reliable mechanized timepieces since the 20th century. This is new. So like you mentioned that CBC thing, and people are really obsessed with punctuality, and I get it, and I can talk more about why, because that has to do with, that's a whole other piece, although it's related. But it's like you do realize this is not a human thing in the sense of like we're like, this isn't who we are. This is a design that we've decided, hey, in order to get certain things accomplished, punctuality is a tool that we can use to do that. And I'll tell you what those things were. Global commerce. That's why we need, that's the place where it matters, right? Because before we had reliable mechanized timepieces, trains were crashing into each other because each town had different
Yeah.
times. And so Greenwich Mean Time, another technology, the creation, right, of Greenwich Mean Time was so that everyone could be like, okay, this is the time it is.
Yep. Yep.
This is the time. So your train and your train, so you are both clear. So we do have a use for it, but it's modern. This isn't something that we've always been able to do. And an interesting historical piece about that is the R&D, the money to have a reliable mechanized timepiece, it came from the urban bourgeoisie, the factory owners, the capitalists, and the monastic clergy. Because in Catholicism, right, they have the oraria,
Hmm.
and there is a belief that saying prayers at the exact same time together makes them more powerful. So they both put their money together to say, we want a good, reliable, mechanized clock, and that's how it came about. So those are the two sources. So that means, or why this is the case, factories were about efficiency. Factory work, which is again novel in terms of the history of humankind, the idea of producing lots of something was not, that was new.
Yes.
Before, it was craftsmen producing their thing, and it was about the quality of the thing. But industrial capitalism was like, hey, we want to mass produce things, so we need efficiency. So if you recognize that that's where efficiency comes from, most of us aren't doing factory, some of us are, but a lot of the people obsessed with efficiency, they're not doing factory line work,
No,
right?
no, no.
And so, and it's great to have efficiency for certain things. We do want things to be efficient. And then I'll also say one of the reasons why Max Weber, a sociologist from the last century, he called bureaucracy and basically this whole idea of efficiency an iron cage, because it's really seductive. It's really nice to know that if I'm traveling, every McDonald's on the road is going to have pretty much the exact same thing on the menu, and it's going to taste the same.
Yep. Certainty.
We love,
We love
yeah,
certainty.
exactly. And so there was this, and that's why he was like, this is so soothing at certain levels, this idea of certainty and efficiency, that this is going to be scary, dangerous, because it will take away a lot of other things that matter just as much. Like right now, the thing that you want is like the artisanal made thing, the thing that someone took time with, that they had knowledge about, that they cared about. Capitalism was all about de-skilled labor. It was all literally what they used to do, and I write about this in the book so that we get, where does this come from? They used to like find the best worker, like who was, and for whatever reason, the father of scientific management was Frederick Taylor,
Yeah.
and he would use
Motion
pick,
theory. Oh yeah. All
yeah,
that stuff.
yeah, time
Yep.
and
Yep.
motion studies, and so he'd give this time this pig iron example. So you find the guy who's the best at like loading the pig iron, and you watch exactly what he did. You write all of that down. You then fire him, and you tell everyone, because right now he's a highly skilled worker. We don't want to pay him for the skill. And then you just write it down. You tell everyone, this is how to be good at picking up and transporting this pig iron. So that's not most of our lives anymore. So the
No.
whole idea of efficiency just doesn't fit what we do.
I wonder if, so I've been thinking about the term, and in my upcoming book, I talk about efficacy. Like the idea, it's that combination of effectiveness and efficiency where it's like,
Yeah.
and so here's an example that I think, and we're going to get into asynchronous stuff too, because that applies to communication, but also to-do lists and all the other stuff that I know some people are interested in. But let's say you walk into a grocery store and, let's assume that you're not going to go Instacart it, and because that's one way to be. I don't want to set, because that's a value, right? Like I don't need to, especially as we're recording this in the holiday season. Who wants to go into a store if they don't have to, right?
Right.
So that's number
Agreed.
one. So let's assume that you didn't do that, and let's assume you went to the store, and you're standing getting ready to check out, and you've got, let's say, 12 items. So it's not nothing, but it's not a lot. You have a choice: self checkout or someone, like, because there's now options. Self-checkout, where it's all automated, you do it yourself, and then there's the checkout people. And to me, there is so many things that can go on there. First off, having the ability, I think one of the things that I think is important here is that organizations giving the option is valuable. Because some people are very savvy at, like, or either they have no problem with the technology of doing it, they're in a hurry, they don't care about the interaction, like they're just like, get in, get out, that's fine. It's like one step away from being at home with Instacart. They just wanted to test the fruit and the vegetables to make sure that it wasn't, because that was their
Yeah,
That was
that's
their
true.
level of quality control, right? Like
Yeah,
that was it.
that's true.
But then there's others, depending maybe on age, depending on, are they introverted, extroverted, whatever. Maybe they have more time. They can
Mhm.
go through the checkout. So to me,
Yeah.
there's this collision course right now of all of these different technologies. And you mentioned time is a technology. Like, so all of these things are coming together. Um, how do we function with this idea of, because there are people that push back on self checkouts, or we go
Yeah.
too far with self checkouts, like the Costco food court that I opened years ago in our town, because I used to work for Costco.
Oh, yeah.
It's all self checkout now. You
Oh,
can still go to the till, but they don't make it look like you can. Like you
oh,
have to type in, and then this line, which used to be a queue, is now just a
oh,
mob of people waiting for their numbers to be called, as if they're at a deli counter or whatever. And it's changed the experience
yeah.
of that. So,
Mhm.
like, with these technologies colliding with the technology of time, how does someone kind of, in your mind, navigate, like, deal with that? Like, what are some of the things that have you thought about this kind of stuff? I'm sure I mean, it's
Oh,
in the book.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, so it depends on your goal. And you mentioned, and you got right to the heart of it. It's like, what is your goal? If your goal, and in fact, there's a European country, I can't recall. I want to say Sweden, but I could be totally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That actually has created, and this is truly slow checkout. They have created lines so that they say and it's for retired people. It's for their older customers who don't have a lot of daily interaction that you might, if you're in a workplace, they get to go slow and no one's behind them saying, come on. Like if you get in the line, you're interested in human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great. And so I think the decision of what your goal is really should drive all of that. So, what is the thing that you are interested in for this moment? And so it really depends whether I want to go. I am much more of a drive up kind of person, like you said, especially during the holidays. But it's just, it's for me, it allows me to spend more time doing something else. Like I have a 16-year-old daughter, and my 83-year-old mother lives in a house on the property, like kind of we're like a compound. She's there. There's other things that I can be doing sitting, and sometimes I'm just tired and I don't want to walk around. Like our local grocery store, they've just like updated it, and it's like the size of a Home Depot. It's huge. So I
Mm-hmm.
also don't like use my energy that way. So that's always the driving force that I say is what do you want to, what's the temporal process that you want to design around? And so for me, walking in a grocery store is just not one that I typically want. And my husband also does a lot of the grocery shopping. I
Sure.
will also say that
Sure,
too.
sure, sure, sure. So this leads me to my next question around judgment and curiosity around all of this stuff. So in a world that is definitely built for speed, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
I mean, we can go back to, it's so funny because you look at things like motion theory and the Gilbreths and
Yeah.
Taylor and all that stuff. And you're like, to your point, not everything needs to be done that way. How do we pull some of that stuff out? So like for time by design, like in someone's personal life, like
Yeah.
how would they apply that, this idea of maybe not, I guess reframing speed would be the best way to put it, rather than think about it just as like as quickly as possible. Like the grocery store analogy is a good one, because the quickly as possible, which by the way isn't entirely true, because if a bunch of people order off Instacart, it could take hours for you to get your, that's something you need to keep in mind, right?
Yeah.
This reframing of speed, especially maybe beyond the organizational pale, maybe in a personal, like how does someone kind of break that pattern of go, 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 fast, 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 now, now, now?
Hmm. This part of this piece is biological. So I'm not a biologist, but
Mm-hmm.
social science. we love to look at like how all of the things affect the social. And one of those things is, right, we do have a cultural for, and not everywhere, but in many Western cultures, speed really is, it's like the goal for most people. But our nervous systems are still built on a sort of, not a sort of, well, because it's not precisely a 24-hour clock, but
Sure.
around a 24-hour clock. And so I have noticed that if everything I do is fast, and there's so many parts of my life that are not, that it leads you to a kind of always fight or flight response to everything, because speed in the way that we use it and why it's so essential to our culture is it's one of the biggest challenges. And so we have this sense once time became money through capitalism, which it wasn't before, but it,
Hmm.
it verifiably did, because people, after the guy who was so good at the pig iron, after he got fired, you literally were just showing up with your time, standing, doing whatever basic things with no thought, and getting money. So time verifiably is money. When that's the case, and when just life involves normal friction, like just living involves friction, like you mentioned, even if you're waiting for insert, there's just friction everywhere. So if that becomes the thing that you see as standing in the way of your survival, that's because that's what it replaces, right? So we don't have wild animals in general that we're running from. That's why we evolved to have fight or flight, to make a decision in the moment. Do we fight this threat or do we flee?
Right.
And we, right? And so our bodies still have the ability to mount a similar response, but now we're mounting that response to our time. We're saying this traffic or this line at this grocery store, these are the things that we feel are a threat, because we're like, well, I got other stuff to do, and that other stuff pays my bills or makes me money. And so because it's so tied to this fight or flight in our autonomic nervous system and the balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, we should just use speed when we need it. Like,
Yeah.
and let's think about, like, do we need it for everything? Like after my daughter was born, because there's enough with that, and she was a baby that did not sleep through the night for a long time, and so I was very tired, and I learned, instead of taking the faster way home, I would actually take the way that had the stoplights, because it just gave me a minute to not be, again, surveying, right? Like the fight or flight is, do I merge now? I was just like, you know what? Stoplight.
Yeah.
I'll sit here at this red light and breathe, and I'll move on. And you're just more effective if your nervous system is balanced. We are not effective if we stay in this heightened alert all of our lives. And that's what speed does, because that's how our body senses speed. We're literally deciding fight or flee. So, yeah.
Let's talk about asynchronous communication, asynchronous work that really came
Yeah.
up, especially during like, and I hypothesize, again, it's just my thoughts around where we're at is now that we're in the shadow of COVID-19. And people are like, okay, let's get back to the office. Like there's this rush to get back. Yeah, I just roll there. So I know, I have a feeling we're going to be speaking the same language here too. This idea of, my theory is that the reason that people, I mean, one of them, but the big one is no one likes to be told what to do. And everyone was told that they had to not go to the office. And if we were already headed down the path, technology was taking us towards asynchronous anyway. People were, I mean, ask anybody who's doing digital nomad work or whatever, like you could work from wherever. The trust factor is a whole other thing. But, I think part of it is when they were told you had to shut down, everyone had to work from home, it wasn't their idea. That there was no agency there. And now that agency has been restored, And there are some, and we've, there's office buildings that are sitting empty that are being paid for. And then I live in Victoria, well, you live in a state capital. I live in a provincial, like government towns. The government would go like these businesses that are right. And I've been to Austin, like they're like, go to the coffee shop, go like those businesses, like where the restaurants, no one's coming in. Why? Because they're all working from, okay, everyone's got to get back to the office. And it's not a few, everyone has to. And so I'd love to hear it. Like, to me, asynchronous work is kind of in this real weird tipping point under attack phase. It's like it had its moment of glory when it needed to be there. And I think it still should. I think hybrid is the way forward, but there's this push to go back the other way. I want to hear your thoughts on that, especially in relation to speed, because a lot of what you're hearing is, well, no, we're going to be in the same room together. So we're going to be able to like communicate it. Our culture is getting destroyed. Like all of these things, when often it's, we've paid for this building, or I don't trust that you're being productive because I can't see you. So therefore I want to see you. So can we touch on that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm with you on the hybrid. I think hybrid just makes the most sense based on what I said is about balance. Like we need a mix of fast and slow. And there is something really valuable about being in person with someone occasionally.
Yes. All the
But do we
time? No.
but do we need to all the time? Because it does take agency away from people. And the thing and the issue of trust, you're exactly right. That's the biggest issue of why when I hear people want it to be all in the office, that's just trust issue that you don't, and it's being stuck in an industrial era where, because even though time is money, time is also not money, right? Like
Yes.
what's really money is a quality product, right? Is an effective strategy. That's what's money.
Yeah.
And being in an office building that 7 or 5 days a week, although there is the 996 culture where people are working 12 hours a day.
Yeah. I've seen that recent research. Oh.
Yeah, and Silicon Valley says they want to do so. That started. I have a graduate student who is studying that in China, and then recently we saw that in Silicon Valley they're like, yeah, we need that too, which is just ridiculous. But that aside, so we really people work better in a variety for different types of work in different settings. So if I'm just answering email, being here at the office is great. Or if I just need to really, well, it's interesting. So I came up to my office on campus today because I knew my home office would be my 16-year-old. There's midterms, and so they have half days. She'd be coming in. And again, my mom's there and our little dog. And I was just like, I just like time alone.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And no one else is here. I'm the only one in the building. And so sometimes I want to be alone. And most people in their office, they're not alone.
No.
So most people want to stay home sometimes just so that there is no one knocking on their door or their cubicle, whatever the case is. We get some work done in silence, right? That we don't have at the workplace. And so to think that to force people to work 100% of the time on an corporate campus is very short-sighted, and it just shows what you think of. To me, it shows what you think of your employees versus a hybrid. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of practical reasons why we can do certain work together better if we're in a co-located space.
Well, and I think what's interesting about when we dive into this, first off, the phrase "time is money," which by the way, this is just the way it's always been floated. It's not the full quote. It's like the same thing with most, like time is money. It's not about
Franklin.
Yeah, exactly. He's more about like, look, if you don't do stuff, like it's a rallying cry against laziness, not about about like the more, if spent time equal, like that's where that's the corruption piece, right? And it's so funny. because you start thinking about it from that vantage point, and you're like, well, all of these phrasings and these ideas, like inbox zero is a good example too. Merlin Mann coined that phrase about like, it's just about knowing what's in your email. It's not about getting the email inbox to zero. It's about
Oh, I
like,
love.
yeah, which is, but the problem is, you know why inbox zero became so popular? It's numerical, just like everything else we're talking about. If I can say I had 83 emails in my inbox, got it to zero, I did 83 things. Yeah, did you? Like, sure. Quantitatively,
I love
absolutely,
that.
but qualitatively, maybe not. Especially if you've subscribed to a bunch. What that person in the office that goes, "Hope you're having a great day." I'm like, that's an email that you didn't need to get. but the intent behind that isn't necessarily to fill your inbox with things that, it's more like, again, that's kind of a relationship, the connection piece, which is why hybrid can work, is it kind of creates both, like it works with both, to your point, time and temporality, right, to a
Yeah,
degree, like yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. um
100%.
I was getting, have you seen the documentary Time Thieves, by the way?
I haven't.
Okay,
I need to
it's
see this.
it's on
All right.
Tubi, TUBI.
Okay.
We'll link to it in the show
Okay.
notes. So what I loved
Okay.
about that documentary is that it talked about Chronos, which is what we've associated with
Yeah.
here, but it also
Yeah.
it says, let's talk about Kairos, which is
Ooh,
an eon, like the bigger, like the ones that we really are talking about here when it comes to
yeah.
temporality, right? But it's not
Yeah.
talking about, it's a European documentary, so it
Okay.
doesn't go into where we are in Canada, the US. It's talking about, it talks about Japan, Germany, Italy, the UK. So it explores areas that we maybe not necessarily look at as often. And this is a problem. It's a problem in all of these places, but it's presenting itself differently, right? Like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in Italy, I remember watching it, and it said that they are still operating, and they've only started to, at least when this documentary came out, to realign the workday, because it was
Hmm.
still attached to the workday that they had when they were part of the Axis in World
Mm,
War II. So there were different elements there that
interesting.
were, yeah.
Really.
Japan historically has had issues with getting people not to go to work when they shouldn't go
Yeah.
to work, to the point where, and
Right.
they explore this in the doc. So it's really fascinating that
Ooh,
culturally we all look at this differently. So my question around that is, when you're working organizationally, especially when you're working remotely, like the cultural quantitative transcends
mhm.
language and all that, because numbers, like, you can see that, right? It's the difference. And again, you know, we both have gone down this path to agree. You obviously have gone down really far, but like the idea of the Toyota factory versus the Chrysler factory, and when Toyota came in and bought the factory, I think it was in California, the guy went down, that like something wasn't working, and the actual CEO went down there and pulled the lever or whatever to stop it, and he helped. And it's like, wait, you're the C-suite guy, what are you doing here? It's like, because this is a cog in the wheel that's been broken, and therefore my job is to help you. I mean, that's
Right.
my whole
Yeah.
role at the top. That's the
Yeah.
mismatch I think that's happening, because quantitative work ultimately adds to bottom lines. It's numerical, but qualitatively,
Yeah.
that stuff lasts. Like that stuff, you know. And so how, in terms of designing one's time, or designing time, because we don't
Yeah.
own it, but there's a whole other thing there. Designing time. How does someone start to make that shift, do you feel, from not necessarily forsaking quantity for quality,
Right.
but bringing
Sure.
it back a little, pivoting it back so that, you know, quality is not left, you know, as roadkill in pursuit of quantity?
Right. Well, one of the things that I have students do is they I'm sorry, because I was just talking with someone else and they called
No.
it a time off. That was when Jeff Strauss, who has a leadership boot camp
Mm-hmm.
podcast. But what I have them do is a time diary and to look at for ideally a week, but for the undergrads, they just have to do one day of every single thing you do in that day. But I've done that for longer periods of time to look at where your time is going. And then when you can see it all, then evaluate, are there things where I'm not getting to? And then you have all the things you're doing, but then you have your goals. And
Right.
usually our goals usually tend to involve more quality things, right? They're things we want to achieve. They're not just things where there's like a one line and you check it off, but there's bigger things that we want to achieve that involve quality. And you look and say, are there a bunch of quantity, fast things that I'm prioritizing? It kind of goes back to Covey's classic thing, right? Where we spend all of our lives in the urgent, unimportant. And when do we ever get to, if we aren't thoughtful, you'll never get to the non-urgent stuff
Yeah.
that's really important, right?
Yeah.
Or so I know he said
No, no, no,
it's urgent
but no, you're
important.
right though. See, because even if you get to urgent and important, the importance is compromised because now you're working fast. So the quality suffers.
Both of them.
The quality.
Yeah.
So you want to be, like you pointed out, in the important but not
Yes.
urgent space.
Yeah. Yes. And so that's one simple thing, is to just realize, are you just caught up in putting out fires and never getting to build anything? And then, because I'm guessing anyone who's operating from that is doing it because of a sense of urgency and drive. And so that's a simple place to pause. I mean, that would be my first step.
Sure, sure. Do you have time for one more question before I let you go? I know we're
Yeah.
close to time. Okay.
Oh,
So,
oh, I have all the time you need.
all right, all right. Temporality in check. All right. So, so I want to talk the obvious, one of the hot button topics right now is AI, right? Generative AI, right?
Uh,
So, like any of these other new technologies, the internet would probably be the most groundbreaking one before this one. Like if you think
yeah,
about them in terms of impact, right? So
yeah,
I've noticed, I don't know if you have, but I've noticed, like, again, this, as soon as we get a shiny new object like this that's got so much power behind it, it's like, how do we make it do everything as fast as possible? Like, it's our default, as
yeah,
opposed to being, quote, responsible or even thoughtful about it. And my thought around, and it's, it's contentious, the idea of, should we be using it, who's using it, who's in control of it? Like, there's so many things, there's layers and layers, and you could spend hours just going into that. But what role do you think that AI can play in a positive way to help
mhm,
with the work that you've done, and helping organizations and individuals kind of, maybe meet that idea of, hey, I can still have some speed, but I'm letting
right.
it do some of the speed for me, like the ones that maybe
Yeah.
don't require as much connection, so that I, as the human, can only do what a human can do right now.
Ooh, I like that. I would base it on, I mean, I'm pretty biased in some ways because my initial use of it, I've never found it to be good at anything quality, but I will admit that I haven't I'm not a power user, and
It's McDonald's, like you mentioned. It's McDonald's,
yeah,
like to a degree, like
and
to some degree,
so
yeah.
right, yeah. And so I have found it useful. So I can just say, like,
Sure.
personally, not for generating ideas, but for, in many cases, especially because academics are notoriously long-winded, for it helping me to clarify my ideas for other people in a simpler way.
Yeah.
So I'll like write the long book, but well, how do I explain this briefly in a social media post, right? Because you're just in it. So I've done the quality stuff. And then now it's like, how do I say this more simply? Because my brain tends to not think that way.
Well, you're in it
So
too. You're so
I'm
in
in
it.
it. I'm
That's the
so
hard
in
part.
it.
Yeah.
I'm so in it. And I would like, yeah. So that's a thing where if I had to do an abstract, it's like, okay, give me, and that has happened, or, yeah. So it's like, how do I abstract this? So that's a good example of it. So I just think whenever quality matters, do it yourself, because that's where you're building and you get better and better. We would never want to lose. And I don't think it's ever going to be a quality. I just can't really picture a case of where it's quality. But But in terms of quantity, I've had grad students use it as a search engine to help their research when they're like, who else has studied this? And we've always had Google Scholar, but in some cases, they're like, I like to use AI, but here's the funny thing. AI will spit out a bunch of it will imagine
It,
publications that don't
it
exist. And
hallucinates
so
a lot. Yeah.
yeah, it hallucinates. So if the grad students don't have the quality training and the knowledge, they will be they will be caught basically for using it, because people will be like, yeah, that doesn't exist. And my lovely grad students were like, yeah, I know so and so. I know one, that journal doesn't exist because I'm a expert in my field, and I know that scholar whose work I follow. I know they haven't published that. So that's what I mean. Like, if it can, but it has helped them in the meantime, right? Because there's some pieces that now it has saved them some time from when I was in grad school. I mean, we had just got past the catalogs that were all on paper, but it was all text based using this Pine email, which was from a long, long time ago. But I would literally have to go through it, and there would be, like, say, 10,000 entries, and there wasn't a lot of research in my field. And so I would spend weeks, and I would little by little go through it to get all the junk. Where time the word time comes up a lot, and it's not related to time. So I
Hmm.
would, so they now can get that right away. That to me is a great balance, where they do the real work, so they know what journals are real, and they know these scholars work, but they don't have to spend weeks going through this, text-based thing of reading all of these articles. And it would literally, sometimes a semester, it would take me that long, depending upon what the search was. So
Wow.
that's, I think, an exam. I know, right?
No, no, but
Yeah.
I think it's what's interesting is we hear a lot about how it's going to erode our critical thinking skills. We've heard a lot about critical thinking. I actually
Right.
think that because AI is becoming so predominant now, and I'm seeing a lot of like, is this AI? Is this AI? Is this AI? And that to me is
Right.
like, that's actually good. No, I mean, it's
Oh,
problematic that there's so much AI out there. That like the
uh,
slop. Well, slop was listed as like the word of the year, I think, this year
yeah,
for
it
it
was.
just, yeah. So the problem I have when I'm looking at it is that's a huge thing. But if people are asking, is this AI? Is this AI? Is this AI? What is that? I need to look
Critical
deeper.
thinking. Oh, I
So
love that.
it becomes the
That's really
question
good.
everything because you're not sure. Meanwhile, before
Good.
AI, because AI wasn't mainstream, if somebody
Right.
posted something online, you would have to decide whether or not you would trust it. Now you're questioning everything, right?
Point. I really like that. Thank you. I love that. Thank you. Yes, that is really good. I appreciate that
Now,
perspective.
now
That's
not e-
really
now not everybody will do that because not
no,
everybody
not
does
every,
these things.
right.
It's actually funny. When we talk about like again that quantity piece, which
Yeah.
can lead to performative work, right? Like just
Yeah.
that I'm checking off these boxes and I'm showing
Yeah.
up and I'm here during
Yeah.
the hours I'm here. Office Space is a great example. That movie Office Space is so good about that because that meeting between the two Bobs and Peter when he says, I just come in and I do my thing and then they talk to the boss about it. The boss goes, yeah, that Pete guy, he's got management written all over him. They're like, I don't know about that. I'm like, well, but but but
Right.
but the funny thing about performative in a culture is that is built into the DNA of creatures. Like ants have this. I did some research around this years ago. There are ants in colonies. They're called either the lazy ants or the lounger ants, and they will go along to get along. So they will not contribute as much as the rest of the colony.
Really? This
Yes,
is fascinating.
it's so interesting because, and it wasn't even. I was in a group. It was like at a conference, and every one of us was like every group was just we had to pick an animal from the animal kingdom, or we were given one. My group was given
Mhm.
like killer bees, which was a whole like holy psychotic. Like those are psychotic creatures, right? But this other group was given the ants, and that was their big takeaway is that they found that, and so their theory would be that if ants are like this, then of course humans are going to be. And so culturally, you can go along to get along. We got Stuart here real quick, who's got something. My problem with using AI is it makes me feel I don't have the answers when really I do. It's like outsourcing internal work. And I get that. I get that. I think that, but if you understand that, like you pointed out, Dawna, that not everything that you get out of AI is going to be accurate or even close to a level of tolerance of accuracy.
Yeah.
You question
yeah.
So you don't just question, that's the other thing. You don't just question, is this AI? You question, is it accurate? That's the next step.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you go,
you learn. That's when your research skills improve, because there's nothing that I ever do on it that I don't check. Like I go and do, but I've done this with Google. I'm a researcher, so I don't believe, in general, I want to know. I want to know.
Is it coming from Wikipedia or not?
Yeah, exactly.
It is so again, I think the other byproduct of this is for those that don't trust what's going on out there, they may stop they're like, I'm not going to dig any deeper. They may not look at anything anymore, which by virtue of that ends up making them more productive in the areas that they actually do want. So there is this second order thinking. It's not unlike the, why is everyone going back to work? Oh, it's because they want to see them, or it's because they have a big lease on this large office complex that they need to pay for, and they're locked into a lease for 5 years, and there's nobody going to get them out of it. So that could be the sole motivate. It's still motivated by the bottom line, but this has been and I think just to end off back where we started, is one of the things that you've done really well in the book is because it is research heavy. Like it is. And it's, I think, but you need to, like, this is a book, not unlike when I was talking about Chris's, where you need to spend time with it. It's not like I'm going to pour over this book, which I think is great. But right out of the gate, the idea, the watches, the measurement, like talking about that. And then that sculpture hit me. It's like, this Dawna, the author, but also gets it. And then I think that by virtue of like art and that feeling that art gives you, that kind of overrides logic. Yeah. That's the kind of because when someone gets to inbox zero and they feel like they were productive, that matters to them more than the actual, was I productive? If that's their answer. And and you know what, for some people, if you're a customer service rep and you get your email to inbox zero as it's been currently defined, great. You were productive, right? But if you're us, that may not be that is not the metric, right? And so when you see, so the feeling matters, and time and temporality, as you've described it, time offers less of that feeling, whereas temporality, I think, really does. Am I on the mark there?
Absolutely. It is something that's sort of embodied in a way. Yeah.
Dawna, this has been a great conversation. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm going to go, but I'm going to go to the Penguin Random House book page, because that's where it's time by design, how communicating slow allows us to go fast. I know we talked a lot about communicating in terms of communicating with our inner selves, not just so much as our external factors.
Yeah, I love it though.
But where can people pick up the book and keep up with the work that you've got going on?
So you can, that funny saying, you can buy the book wherever books are sold, but you can go either, MIT Press published it, so they have links to a lot of other places where you can buy it. And there's, Kindle has it, or Amazon has a Kindle version of it. You can buy it from Amazon, but pretty much anywhere you buy books. And I am on Instagram. My handle, I guess they call it, I teach time. So, yeah.
Excellent. Dawna, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun. Such a fun conversation. Thank you.
All right, we're going to wrap up the live stream here, everybody. Dawna, can you stick around for like 2 more minutes once I wrap it up? The screen's going to go dark once I end the live stream. Thanks to everybody. By the way, real quick, I'm going to Gloria Jean, this is a great productive conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Thanks to everybody for being here live, and we will see you later. Take care. And this episode, by the way, will be coming out, I believe, in March as its full edited version. But this video, if you have questions, comments, or anything like that, throw them in here if you're watching this beforehand. And again, thanks, Dawna, for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah.